our next speaker, and she is Carla Tanas. Carla is CEO and founder of Future Agro Challenge and is a successful entrepreneur with strong social leadership skills. A citizen of the world with deep intercultural understanding and international experience, having lived in three continents, that is US, Middle East, and Europe. She's a leading she's leading a global initiative for future of food and agriculture, and she runs a very successful initiative, which is Future Agro Challenge, where she invites startups and innovators from all across the globe, which compete with each other, and finally you have one winner, and that winner is supported to ensure they are successful. In her cohort, there have been a lot of successful people who have done very well, and have been fortunate enough that I happen to be one of among the top 10 in 2019. Thanks, Carla, for both being speaker here and giving us food for thought, which has made me motivated to work in this sector more. Floor is yours.
Deepak, it's a pleasure to be here always, and thank you for your continuous inspiration. So I suppose you invited me here to give a bit about my story and speak a bit about, as a female agripreneur myself, or entrepreneur, how I ended up in the position I am in. My story as an entrepreneur actually started 3 days after I graduated university. And I often say that entrepreneurship found me. I was never somebody that knew that I wanted to be an entrepreneur. As a female entrepreneur, I, like many, have encountered many obstacles around gender and bias, especially being a young female. It started at a very young age, around 20 years old. Starting the entrepreneurship journey wasn't in agriculture, actually. I turned into the family retail business into a catering business. And even by then, at the age of 20, I encountered gender inequality within family politics. Coming that, there's different origins, different cultures, you tend to see that there are some gender inequality in the way you could move forward. Which led me, again, I turned and I looked at it as an opportunity, and I started my own events business, and which became very successful. It was an event agency which catered to customers internationally. I was looking at budgets between 2 to 3 million per event. And within several years after doing what I was doing, being very successful, I decided that I was going to sell this off. And the reason being was that the supplier relation did not intrigue me. There was a lot of gender bias behind the scenes of running events, and I thought that this is not the way that I wanted to move forward. So I decided that I wanted to take my previous experience and do something impactful. And what more was it? I was looking around, living in Greece, and there was the crisis back in 2012. And so I wanted to be part of the change to see how I'm going to take that and move it forward. And since 2012, we co-founded with my partner, Industry Disruptors Game Changers. And this is a nonprofit organization that supports innovation and entrepreneurship, especially targeted towards the youth. Greece, if you imagine, before the crisis, was a very public sector mindset. A lot of people were motivated that when they finished university, you go into the public sector and you always have a forever job for life. So trying to change this mindset and say, why don't you take opportunities to try your own business was a really difficult change, because you had people who were reactive to saying, I could have something safe for the rest of my life. Why would I do something like this? Slowly, as crisis turned into opportunity, we did manage to be part of the first runners in the innovation ecosystem here. And since then, Greece has become one of Greece has really grown as far as the innovation ecosystem, creating a lot of interesting startups, and the scene here has really grasped forward. In 2014, I fell pregnant, and then I took a look around me, and this is where I said, okay, now something is really wrong. This is where I wanted to get involved with the food system. And so what more can I do? I started Future Agro Challenge. Future Agro Challenge started as a simple competition, because back then a lot of people were looking at agriculture and the food system from traditional standpoints. In 2015, there was just a handful of people in the industry that were looking at it from an innovative eye and saying what solutions we could bring forward. For those who don't already know, Future Agro Challenge, this is now a global initiative in over 60 countries across 5 continents. Our aim is to address the Sustainable Development Goal number 2, zero hunger. And the essence is to be part of the solution. Nobody by themselves could do this by themselves. Our philosophy at Future Agro Challenge is that ag and agriculture innovation comes first. And the global food system is so integrated that you need all cultures, you need everybody to be part of this change. So what more can you do than to create a systemic approach in doing that? And not through traditional nonprofit organizations, rather than bringing the frontline runners to the front scene. And those were our agripreneurs. In order to do that, we created an international competition where we would seek out local agripreneurs from around the world and give them the opportunity to highlight themselves in their local community and then make their way into the national level and then into the international level. Now our global challenge is running in over 60 countries. So we have entrepreneurs like yourself who have come from all walks of life, everywhere from India to Africa to Europe, from Latin America. And we've seen all different types of challenges and all different types of solutions, everywhere from farm to fork. And it's amazing the work that could be done when you work at the very local level, because it's just about bringing those pieces together. So we work with partners across the globe, and we do this with the aim to inspire local entrepreneur innovation ecosystems nowadays is where we're looking at. It's not only about the entrepreneur finding a good idea or getting the right funding, but if they don't have the ecosystem around them, then there's no way that, it's not no way, but it makes it more challenging than for them to flourish. A lot of times we do have, in many of these countries, brain drain because the ones who are talented will tend to get investments from other places. So in the aim to support local ecosystems, our work is really on the ecosystem level. Our global international competition leads to the Global Agripreneur Summit. And Deepak, if you have 2 minutes to play that video just to give an idea of what the Global Agripreneur Summit looks like.
Sure, I'll do that straight away.
Just to say a few words about the Global Agripreneur Summit. This is a traveling summit that goes from country to country, and this is the climax of where the international competition leads to. We bring in all our finalists from around the world, along with speakers and investors and mentors, and this is a place where they could exchange knowledge. So if you want to start it.
Yeah, start it.
I don't think it's it. I think you have something else here.
Just give me a second.
So one of the main things that the Global Agripreneur Summit actually achieves is the ability to energize traditional agricultural communities. We've seen this happen when we were in Colombia. We've seen this happen in South Africa. We've been to Turkey. We're in Greece. We've been in discussions to bring it to India. And it's really fundamental when you could bring the whole innovation ecosystem to come to work and to give light to those from farmers to policymakers to see that being part of the experience, what they could do at the local level. So here is the summit. I don't think there's sound, but it doesn't matter. I'll just give everybody an idea. As part of the summit, we even award our female agripreneurs, those that are making change, and we were happy to see them come from different walks of life, even from South Africa, from Colombia, from all those places. Now, as I mentioned, what we really do when we bring all these pieces together is really work on the ecosystem level. By bringing that, we have also introduced the Future Agro Challenge Impact Makers program, and this is really how do we bring organizations, no matter what the size, small or big, around the world to build successful agri-food ecosystems. And this really focuses in on empowering and strengthening capacity builders, and the aim to help achieve employment generation, social economic development, and community development with further collaboration. We piloted in the MENA region with 11 organizations, and they are already working together on more projects and funding for newer projects that are coming out. And soon we're going to run our second cohort connecting the MENA region with Sub-Saharan Africa. The importance of collaboration and ecosystem building is fundamental because agriculture is a 10,000-year-old industry. To make that change is not going to happen alone with technology. You're talking about layers and layers and layers of understanding. I want to bring forth some important aspects. Crops in themselves are gender biased. There's a gender differentiation in crops in themselves. We have what we call cash crops, and you also have what you call crops that are built for great reputation. It's important we really go down to the local level of the community. There's some countries, for example, in some communities where cash crops are a reflection, and which are harvested once a year, are a reflection of male-dominant crops. This is something that the male will use as an investment process. Whereas crops that are great for reputation is something female-oriented, because a lot of the times these are crops that are around the nutrition of the community, of the household, and taken into accountability. Just from understanding the differentiation in the crops, you understand that the technology in itself cannot solve that. If we move to the level of the culture in itself and the way the community works, you can see all walks of life in all different countries. I'll give you two different examples. For example, in Ethiopia, females are less pronounced. They tend to be more within their household. Even though they're working in agriculture, they're not the ones who are really pronounced and really out there. Actually, they are the ones who have the appetite for knowledge. They are the ones who transfer knowledge within their household and communities. Yet they're not accounted for when we talk about agricultural in the GDP, when we talk about agriculture on the policy level, and when we talk about agriculture on the gender bias level. In Indonesia, another community, the inheritance from one land to another actually goes through the female, doesn't go through the male. There's a lot of female dominance and a lot of aspiring female entrepreneurs in Indonesia because of the way the community and the culture works. So before we go to understanding the technology in itself, we really have to go down to every layer in the community and really understand what is happening on the way the crops work in themselves, the way the community works in itself, the way the culture works in itself, before we can start building and there is no one-stop fits all solution, but a solution that could help these ecosystems come together. This is what we do at Future Agri Challenge, and this is why we believe that everybody has a piece of the puzzle, and working in a systematic approach is the only way that we could bring this all forward. And that's my story in general.
Great, Carla. Awesome story. Very inspiring, right? And the way you, I'll say that, phased it, right? From the challenges you saw, opportunities you created, and then converted it into something which is an ecosystem. So my first question to you would be like, as you have very rightly pointed out, two geographies, and I have a honor or opportunity of working in both of them, Indonesia and Ethiopia, right? Very diverse type of societies. And as you rightly mentioned, Indonesia is very much, specifically in agriculture, women-dominated society. And similarly, you'll find in Vietnam as well. So both Indonesia and Vietnam, you see like, even in corporate sector or in enterprise sector, you see like, women are on the forefront of it. While in the Ethiopia, they are a little bit subdued. Now, when you work in 60 countries, right? And definitely, as you rightly said, that you work with a local partner. But as an organization which is controlling or which is trying to work with all these organizations, how difficult it is to understand the gender dynamics of each country you approach, because I believe like, there are nuances which you have to understand rather than just listen from second-hand source.
Definitely. It is very challenging because it's very complex, Deepak. We tend to think of gender equality as, how much investment does a female get, or gender equality, how much do they get as far as funding from any organization or from getting into a bank. But there's so many alternatives. There are cultures in which, as you said, some females prefer not to do that. It's not a matter of not being able to. It's not within their culture. It's not within their wanting to do that. So when you understand, to be able to go down to that very level, we have to really engage on the local aspects. And to do that, we could only do that with all the partners we have across the system. And that's why our Global Entrepreneurs Summit is really strong, because we bring these conversations and these dialogues forward within and hold workshops around that, in which we discuss with policymakers about these different approaches that could be taken on the very local level.
I would also like to understand, building an ecosystem is so important, right? And how strongly other women try to support, right? And especially those at the high seat, right? Because you see, not too many, but there are quite a lot of women on the high seat. So do you get those support, or once they also reach on the top of the pyramid, their interests also become a little bit subdued? What's your view on that?
Again, it's a case by case and a character by character. We need to remove away from the gender discussion in a very, in a level that it's a one size fits all. There are females who are very active, just like there are males that are very active. There are, female leadership positions that once they get there, don't motivate to do much else. There are others that do. So it's a matter of really driven by the person behind it. We are happy to see that the dialogue is becoming intentional. And I think that is the importance, and very much like your web summit, it is here today, the intentionality of bringing more female voices forward. What is important as well is that we bring female voices forward in more layers of the agricultural system. It's not, I understand that AgTech is a big voice, and it is this many solutions to bringing sustainable agriculture forward, or addressing the amount to, supply and demand to come forward with the population growth. What is important though is to understand communities. We have to understand cultures. That is agriculture in itself. So, and this is a big discussion point that nobody is speaking about when we speak about the gender equality, bias.
Now, moving away a little bit from the women-specific topics, I would like to understand, you have interacted with so many startups, you have interacted with so many innovators, you have interacted with a lot of ecosystem players. How do you see the EdTech ecosystem evolving in general, and specifically in Europe and the countries, for example, Greece or Spain, where or Netherlands? How do you see it doing? I'll say that in terms of innovation.
I think that the agtech scene is moving in a very good pace. I think we tend to see a lot of young farmers who are adopting new solutions. Even across Europe, even across Africa, there are solutions really happening in the rural areas. Where the difficulty lies is the generational gap. Those rural areas where you have older farmers, or you have older generations that have worked in a way, because farming is also a lifestyle. So they've worked in a certain way, is coming and telling them to do it differently. I think with the new, especially in Africa, where there's 60% of them is youth, there's going to be a very fast transmission of agtech in the next coming years. And I think it's already happening in front of our eyes.
And this is actually a follow-up question to what you just said. We have seen that a lot of innovation is happening in, if you see that, few pockets, some pockets of Europe, in America, typically in US, you are seeing there is a complete new bio-revolution happening. Less on digital side, but pretty strongly on bio-X side, right? From gene editing to different sort of inputs and different ways of doing farming, right? The regenerative farming, and which is turning around the whole ideas which we were having on farming. And then suddenly you go to Africa and you tell someone that actually the tilling is not required, or tilling is the waste of time. Why are tilling? So how you see, because you work with the different countries, people from different walks of life on different part of the ecosystem, how do you bridge this gap between where the technology is being created or thought about, and where the technology needs to be deployed, because the real change is going to come when Asia, Latin America, and Africa, they start adopting these technologies, because this is where the food balls are, right? And it is very difficult to take a technology from US and Europe to this part of the world. In fact, at HnyB, we work very closely with tech companies who are working in these advanced market to bring their solution to Africa and Asia, because you need some nuances. In your view, what do you see how to bridge this, I'll say, that deep divide of technology companies? Even if you see that previous speaker, he was talking about going from Europe to US, right?
Yeah.
And that's challenge. Do you see that this gap getting bridged, or it's too difficult for people to take it on?
Look, I really believe that the fact, one thing farmers and, for farmers to adopt it, farmers themselves have their own egos, right? They've been doing something a certain way. They've known how to do it. They've been leading and doing that. It's like somebody coming to your house and telling you what to do. If you don't take ownership of that, you will never do it. You feel it's somebody's intruding into your household. And I think that's the same, that's what's happening in these countries, in India and Africa and in Latin America. What we are seeing is the youth adopting and owning these technologies, whether it be a transfer of knowledge, whether it be a replication of what they see in other markets and doing it themselves in their own, in a domesticated way. But the fact that they adopt it and they know how to distribute this technology or how to speak with the adopters of this technology, I think that's a fundamental part in moving things forward. And again, we are seeing this change. We are seeing younger farmers getting involved. We are seeing younger farmers getting engaged in all discussions, getting, out there and trying to adopt these technologies and becoming ambassadors for change in their own communities. So this is happening. What we do also see is the challenges of coming from worlds like Europe or the United States and trying to adopt these technology and expand it. It's not like Facebook, which could expand, globally so fast. These technologies really need to work on the cultural level, and and this is where the gap is. So either they adopt a partner, or they might have to be fast enough to do it before somebody local will do it themselves.
Now, again, a follow-up question on this. You work with, again, the startups from across the globe, and you're having, I know, that super awesome network, right, in all these countries, because your alumni and your cohorts, right, that create a very sizable, I'll say that, payload, right, to get information from. Are you seeing any shift in the way or the trends where, this whole ag tech, whether it is on digital side or a bio side, happening post-COVID, or do you see that not much has changed?
No, there is a change. There is a change, especially on the ag tech side. I think it's fundamental. People are realizing more and more that they need to do that. The bio side, again, we have to look at the infrastructures behind it, and that would be region by region based. Bio side needs a lot of infrastructure and the correct funding in order to allocate this type of technology forward, and a certain research and understanding around that. So education is fundamental. There are these changes happening. Again, I would have to tell you on a case-to-case basis, but we do see such change. And during COVID, I think it was a very quiet period for people to reflect and to see which way they want to go forward. Some people did have the ability to have such high demand, they didn't have to reflect because they had to cater to all the food system that was, deteriorating across regions. But for those who did have that and did shed light on what they could do next, there was the ability to adopt new technologies then and there. But again, it must have been something close by within the region, within local access, because as you saw for COVID, there was a big hit on the logistics market.
You are right, actually. In fact, in digital world, because I've had honor of creating a couple of companies which I exited, and at that time the focus was to just focus specifically on digital technology, promote it, be evangelist. Everywhere you go, you talk about artificial intelligence, machine learning, blockchain. And suddenly when in my new role of working and advising and helping tech companies, whether it is bio or digital side, to come to Asia and Africa, I suddenly start seeing the total different dynamics. right? Instead of 20 people who are just trying to do code, suddenly you are having 170 PhDs, right? But at the same time, I realized that, like, the big impact when we see, like, on how the farming is being done and trying to solve the real grave challenges of agriculture is coming a lot from the bio side than the digital side. And digital side is also a little bit more fragmented. So, like, if you create some solution which works in India, is bound not to work that great in US. However, that's not the case in the bioeg, right? A good seed is a good seed, whether it is in Indonesia or it is in India or it is in US. Do you see, like, we need to be talking far little bit more of bioeg as well, because we talk a lot about digital innovations, but end of the day, the major change makers I've seen has been the bio side of the tech. What's your view on this?
Definitely. I mean, you also have to, on the bio side, who the distributors are. We do tend to see that there is a bit of move in the bio side, and there is a lot of change makers who are doing a lot of good work there. Funding is fundamental for this part. So you will tend to see it in certain regions and not in others. But the distribution, again, I think, we have seen fundamental partners come around. We have seen a lot of collaborations happening on this. So yes, there is a drive on both ends.
So you touched the very important point, funding. How do you see funding? Is it improving, or is there change? Is there shift because of COVID, or overall in tech domain as well? Over past 5 years, 6 years, since you have been running this awesome, I'll say that initiative. I won't say it's an event; it's an initiative because it's galvanized a lot of societies, galvanized a lot of youngsters. How do you see the funding patterns changing over these 5 years in this domain?
I would definitely say within the 5 years prior to COVID, there was definitely a growth, and right before COVID, we were expecting real growth within this industry because there was a lot of investors who were starting to get engaged and saw the need for it. Even though it's a long-term investment, and this is usually the part that risk takers don't want to do, is wait long-term. But in that case, when COVID hit there, and I think we see this all over, there has been a reluctancy to take on risky behavior or long-term behavior. It still remains to be seen where it's going to go, but I do believe that it is very attractive to investors, especially as the food system has come into the forefront, into the news and everywhere in the media. We're realizing that if we don't make this change as a whole, it's not going to happen. So there is definitely appetite. I just think some recovery is necessary before we start to see growth again, like we were seeing it before COVID.
Yeah, I'll just give you, it's not a question, but parting remark. Very interesting one. In fact, very recently there was a report that India is the third largest economy where actually, there have been investment in edtech, and the amount quoted was $1 billion. And that, India is known for digital tech, right? We are not known too much of bio. And a very close friend, she very recently raised $200 million plus, right? Bio egg company, and they are moving towards raising $1 billion, just one company. So I believe that that's where the the perspectives are changing. COVID is making us more, right, think about the bio part of it, because maybe we have seen vaccine is more important than a Facebook or a YouTube. So thanks a lot, Carla, for a very insightful session, and it was pleasure as always to learn from you. And as we have touched investments, and we are having a next speaker who is a legend in that era, and I would like to introduce her. And thanks again, Carla, for your time.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure being here.